chat a little around insights. Now, there's a very good book written by a man by the name of Gary Klein, who is basically called Seeing What Others Don't. And he's got some fascinating case studies in there that deal specifically with insight generation. And we've already dealt with some aspects of assumptions, but when it comes to insights, these are the things that we interpret from information and we apply a lens of knowledge over this. So this is what we're actually doing. There's data, there's information, there's knowledge, then there's insight. And this is really around what we've observed. All right, so we haven't necessarily tried to understand insight, but we are now observing it and sort of calling it out. So there's an example for you of the difference between the two. So what we want to deal with now is really the contradictions, connections, the different types of discerning insights that Gary Klein refers to. Okay. I found this little example, quite helpful, and my apologies for it's graphic, but it's a public available little example. And as I was reflecting upon, well, how do we extract an insight and then identify problems and the rest of it, you can see that there's one perspective that relates to an insight, and that is really when we combine a user and their need. So, overworked husband or overworked family is looking to feel good about recycling and basically that they're contributing to life in general and a better society, sustainability. And here you've got your insight. So basically, when things pile up, this person feels behind, and ultimately the big pile on the curb feels more like generating waste. So there's aspects of emotion in there that we would have determined through interviews and through observations and all of those things. All right. So that's the type of insight that we can extract. You can see later on in this module, when we start to get to the problem space and the how might we question, you can use this to help you identify a series of how might we questions. So if you've got that insight, well, how might you try and address it? And you can see as a few examples of, well, how might we try and reduce that pile of waste outside so that this individual feels better about contributing more to society. So, this is what we're trying to do with insights, and what we want to be able to do as we go through all of this data and information points is we really want to be able to identify or use the techniques of contradiction, connection, curiosity, and correction in order for us to extract those insights. Okay, so contradiction speaks for itself. Okay, there's an inconsistency or a confusion or a conflict. Why are people that have less money or on the dole spending more online? Now, there's a classic case of a contradiction. Something doesn't make sense there, right? And may require some further exploration. Okay. There's things like connections, curiosities, and coincidence. Well, hold on. Why is this particular individual who's buying this particular product in the store also buying this particular type of sweet? And what we've got here is a connection between smoking and mints to make the breath smell better. So there's all of these types of techniques that we can work through, and maybe let's work through one or two examples just to give it a little more, make it a little more solid for you. Okay, so this one is what's referred to as a contradiction, and it's a story about two police officers who were pulled up at a traffic light and were watching a man in a very nice car next to them at the traffic light, and the individual took his cigarette and he put his ash onto the seat right next to him. So the policemen were like, hold on, that's a bit odd. And that was a contradiction. He has a nice car with the person dressed all smart, but he's flicking ash onto the seat. So they pulled him over, and guess what, they basically found out that he'd stolen the car. So he had this attitude it wasn't his car, and he didn't mind about ashing it. So that's an example of what one sees and one observes, and it's a contradiction. So remember that a contradiction makes us doubt, and you kind of think, well, hold on, that can't be right. Something doesn't make sense there. And then there's the old principle of, well, if it's too good to be true, it's normally not. Okay, so our underlying skepticism is something that drives this curiosity as we begin to look into this sort of exploration space. Now, the other one is to do with connections. And basically the insight from this one, well, I won't tell you the insight yet, let me give you the problem. So basically in World War II, the engineers were wanting to put armor on the Spitfires that were shot down. So in other words, they could protect the pilots from flak and gunfire. So what they were doing is they were analyzing the planes that returned from bombing and fighting across the Channel, and then they were looking at to where all the bullet holes went, and they were placing armor on those areas to reinforce it. Okay. But this actually did very little to return the pilots safely. In other words, adding armor to the planes did absolutely nothing. Okay. And the insight from this, you would chuckle about it now, but this is what they actually did, was that they were studying the survivors. They weren't studying the planes that were shot down. So the answer was actually counterintuitive. They should probably have put the armor plating on the areas that didn't have bullet holes in it. So this is really just a case of connecting the dots. Once again, curiosities. They make us wonder what's going on, whilst contradictions make us doubt. So this is more of a wonderment as opposed to a doubt. We can increase our connection insights by exposing ourselves to lots of different ideas that might make better connections. This is why it's always good to have other people, other research in your ideation, in your 2x2 phases, all the rest of that, because what happens is they bring together different skill sets, different knowledge sets, and they can help you create different connections. And I often see that, if we have a sort of a good, a diverse group that we can work with, there's these great aha moments as they, connect the dots with different things. And this is another example of the rudder and the oil sort of turning the ship, and the aerospace example we spoke about around identifying that it was people in a cafeteria. Those things all come from the insights that we extract, and they are connection, curiosity, and coincidence type of insights. Okay. The last one I'll talk through is what is referred to as a creative desperation. Gary Klein actually added this as the next level once he'd done a few more case studies. And this really just talks about the sometimes counterintuitive decisions that people make when that something serious is happening, and it's that sort of knee-jerk reaction that is done based upon intuition, and that's those little insights that we're trying to extract, and often the ones that are gold because they're quite tacit. We don't really discover them that easily. You'll only discover them when people are under pressure. So this particular case is a story of some 15 smoke jumpers. They were trapped by a collision with a fire. So the fire was on the opposite slope, and it jumped sides, and it basically put all these smoke jumpers in danger. And there was a fellow by the name of Dodge, and he had sort of 4 beliefs that he would anchor his understanding on. One is that a steep uphill slope that favors the fire it favors the fire over runners, in other words, over the smoke jumpers. So basically, if you're on a steep hill, the fire is going to catch you no matter what you do. Okay. The other principle and belief was that the fire behind them was picking up speed, and there was a principle of safety ahead. Rocky Ridge would be safe. Okay, so could all of them make it to this rocky ridge as the fire was climbing this hill? So that you've got heavy dry grass fueling the fire all around you. What do you do? What do you do in this situation? Well, those that tried to make the rocky ridge actually died. They didn't get there in time. The fire caught up with them. But Dodge tried another approach on the other side, which was he started a fire in front of him and basically took refuge in the ashes. So no one else really understood what the heck is this person doing. We're in the middle of a fire and he's starting a fire. So he basically pre-burnt the ground and then got the team to sit in the ashes so that the fire wouldn't consume them. Okay, so this is a way to get yourself out of a trap. It seems inescapable at the time. It's counterintuitive, but basically these are the sort of golden levers that you'd work with. Now, this is probably where the oil tanker would fit better. Okay, is this creative desperation pieces. Though that little guidance rudder on the oil tanker, there's small levers that can have a massive impact. Normally, they're discovered in situations like this. Okay, so remember also that when you're having conversations, you want to extract personal insights. So understand the situation. the general insight and the paths which took them there. So that's why story is so important when you're interviewing and you're actually interacting with somebody, because the story tells so much more around what's going on around it. Just the same as these examples give you a much richer experience of how to extract insights than if I just gave you a bunch of bullet points, which I'm about to do. Okay, so here's an example here. You can see that this is to do with our train example, and you can see we've got some data points. No public announcement about why the train is not on time. People on their phones. Okay, so basically there's an insight that we've been able to pull out, whether it's induction, abduction, whatever the case might be. So people want useful information in a timely fashion, and people seem reliant on cell phones from connecting with people. So these are the two insights. You see, there's still more research that's got to go into it. We don't understand the reasonings, but there are insights that we can probably use to come up with a decent how might we question. All right, so hopefully that'll give you some view into the insight space. Now go and apply some of this logic to your wall of discovery and see if you can extract some of those insights. Catch you next time.